Okay guys, as you can see, I haven't done much. All I did was I linked my HTML to my CSS and I named my title to be neon button. And for my body, I have a link here with a class name of btn with a text of neon, and that's all I have for my HTML for now. So for my CSS right here, I have my custom property for my colors, my neon color and my BG color. And for my box size, I made it to be border box for my before and after. So what I'm going to do now next is to target my body. So when I target my body, and the first thing I'm going to do in my body is to give a minimum height. A minimum height of 100 SVH. So after giving that, what I'm going to do now is to display grid. Display grid. So my next thing is to place item center. Place item center. When I place the item to center, I want to have a background color, which is going to come from my custom property, which is my BG. So the next is I have to have my text color, which is going to be color, my neon color. After having my neon color, then what I'm going to do now is to give a font family, which my font family is going to be system UI. Okay guys, now the first thing we are going to do is to target our button. So I'm going to write btn.btn, then this. So the first thing I'm going to do is to change my font size. I want to put my font size to be 4M. So after making my font size to be 4M, I want to make it a display inline block. So after that, what I'm going to do now is for my cursor to be pointer. So next is to make I want this my underline to disappear. So what I'm going to do is to make a text decoration to be none. So after making this text decoration to be none, when I save it, my underline is going to go and my font size has increased to 4M. So let me come down and bring a color for my text. So my color is going to be my var. So my neon button, my neon is going to be my color. So when I save, my color is going to change. And also I want to put a border. So if I put a border of 0.125M solid, and I put my neon color. So when I save, now I have a border here, which is 0.125M. That's my border. So when I click, so I'm going to go down and put padding because I want a little bit of space. So my up and down is going to be 0.25M and my left and right is going to be 1M. So this is the space that I'm talking about. The reason I'm using M here is because so when I change my font size to like, let's say 2, my button will also decrease. So the less my font size is, the lesser my button is going to be. So now when I make it to be 5M, it's also going to increase. My font size will also follow. So when I make it, I'm going to make it just to be 4M. That's how I want it to be. But with that also, let me also make for my border radius here, I can actually use something called current color, which means if I write current color here, it's just going to use the color of my text instead of me writing another color here. Meaning maybe I use black as my text color and I'll come to my border radius and also write black. So instead of writing black, I can just use current color, which is going to use my text color for my border. If I save, you can see it's using the same color. Even though I'm not writing my neon, I'm using current color. So what I'm going to do now is to put a border radius because my edges are too sharp, so I want them to be curved. So I'm going to use my border radius to be 0.25M. So when I save, my edges are going to be a little bit curved, and that's how I want them to be. So what I'm going to do next is to make it to be shiny using a text shadow. And for the top and bottom is going to be 0. For the left and right is also going to be 0. For the blood, I want it to be 0.125M. And I'm going to use current color because I want the color of my shadow to be the color of my text. So instead of me writing the color, I'm just going to use current color. So when I save, and I have this weird looking shadow which I don't understand, that's because I don't have space here. But if I click here and I save, and that's my shadow here. So, and I'm also going to use two current colors, I'm going to write comma here. I'm going down. I'm going to write 0, 0, and for the blood, I'm going to use 0. The first one I use 0.125. For the second one, I'm going to use 0.45 m, 0.45 m. So when I save, you're not noticing any difference. That's because I didn't put a color for it. The first one I use current color. For this one, I'm going to use white. So when I save, it's going to be another white showing. So, but it's too white. Yeah. So the reason I'm giving it these two colors is just to give it a combination of this shiny color that will just appear small. So what I'm going to do next is to give it a box shadow. A box shadow. Top and bottom is going to be 0. Left and right also is going to be 0. And I'm going to give the 0.5 m. So I'm going to use current color. But in this case, normally shadows come outside the box, but in this case I want it to be inside the box, inside my button here. I want it to appear somewhere around here instead of outside. So I'm going to use something called insert. So when I insert this word, so what's going to happen is when I save, it's going to appear inside my box. The shadow is appearing inside my box. So another thing is I'm going to use two shadows, the one that is going to appear inside and the one that is going to appear outside. So another thing is I'm going to write 0 up and down, 0 left and right, and I'm going to use 0.45 m to be my blood, which is going to be I'm going to use my neon color, sorry. So when I save, okay, sorry, it's not working just because I don't have a comma here. So when I put this comma, that's to show you that you have to be careful. So with this comma, you can see now that I'm having my shadow inside my box, inside my button, and also outside my button here. Okay, now we are going to go into Studio Element. If you don't know more about Studio Element, I have a video on it. Feel free to go and check it out. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to write my dot btn. That's the first thing. And these two dots. Then I'm going to write before. So the first thing I'm going to write for all Studio Element is this content property, something like this. If you're not used to it, it's going to sound somehow to you. So this is its property. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to make it a position absolute. A position absolute. Then making this a position absolute, I have to make this a position relative. That's the reason I have my position relative to be here, because it has to be relating to my button. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to make a background color to be red. My background color to be red. I'm making it to be red so that you guys can actually see it. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to make my top to be 0. My top to be 0. I'm going to make my bottom to be 0. Bottom to be 0. After that, I'm going to make my left to be 0. Then my right also is going to be 0. So when I save, this is actually what we have been working here. So you're not seeing any space here because my left is 0, my top is 0, my right is 0, and my bottom is also 0. But for my top, I can make it to be 50%. Let me show you something, guys. If I make it to be 50% here, 50%, and I save, so it comes down 50%. But in this case, I don't want it to be 50%. I want to take it below my bottom. I want to have it around somewhere here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it. I'm going to remove my top and bottom here and leave my left and right here. So I'm going to make a weight of 100%. 100%. My height also to be 100%. When I save, you see it 100%. So what I'm going to do now is to make my height, my top, to be 120% so that I can bring it down. I can bring it somewhere around here to take it down. So I'm going to make it to be 120%. 120%. So that it can be below my button. 120%. So when I save. So after having my background color to be red, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to change it to my neon color. So I'm going to come here and change my background color to be neon color instead of red. So after having that, I'm going to also come down here. First of all, I'm going to write transform. Now what is going to follow is going to be perspective. But for my perspective, I'm just going to make it 1M, but you can also play with the values. And after that, I'm also going to use a rotate X, which is going to be 40 degrees. Then what is following is going to be my scale, which is going to be scale. My scale is going to be 1, 0.35. And yeah, and that's all for my transform. Okay, now after saving, this is what we have for our result here. So what I'm going to do next is let me adjust this a little bit. So what I'm going to do next is to give a filter. I'm going to use filter, and I'm going to use a blur, which is going to be 1M. So I want you guys to just notice what happened. That's the beauty. Look at how beautiful this is. Come on, look at how you just made it. Like, this is so beautiful. So after making it to be filter, I want to reduce the opacity. I'm going to write opacity, which I'm going to reduce it to at least 0.7. So when I save, as you can see, it has reduced a little bit to 0.7. Yeah, so I want, when I hover on my button, there should be some features that will appear. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to write .btn, and I'm going to follow it with hover. So the first thing I'm going to write in my hover here is to change the background color. I'm going to change the background color to my neon color. I'm going to change the color of the text to be my BG color. So I'm going to write the color, which is going to be followed by bar. So when I save, my color is my BG color. So what I'm going to do next is to give it a text shadow of none, because I don't want the shadow here to appear when I hover. So I want the shadow to disappear. So I'm going to write text shadow, like shadow of none. So let me come back here, come down here, and make a pseudo element. So I'm going to write .btn, and it's going to be by, since the first time what I did the first was I did my before, and now it's going to be my after. So I'm going to come down here and say, alright, okay, for all my pseudo element, there's a property content. What I'm going to do next is to give it a position of absolute, which my button was my relative, so I'm going to make this a position of absolute. So I'm going to make it a top to be 0, and bottom to also be 0, and I'm going to make this my left to be 0 also, and my right also to be 0, also. Okay, for the first thing I'm going to do is to give a background color. I want to give a background color of red so that you guys can actually see it. So after giving it a background color of red, what I'm going to do is to give it a box shadow. I want to give it a box shadow, which my top and bottom is going to be 0. My top and bottom is going to be 0. My left and right is also going to be 0. And I want to have a 2M to be blurred. And I'm going to have the color of my neon button, So when I save, so I have my background color to be red. And if you notice, I have a box shadow here by this side, which is having my neon color. But for here, I made my border color to be current color. Let me just make it to be my neon color. Let me make it to be my neon color. So when I save, it's having my neon color to be here. So let me come back here. Let me make it after making it to be my neon color. So I'm going to make the opacity to be 0. I know you'll be thinking, well, then why am I making it the opacity to be 0? See, now it's gone. But don't worry, I'm going to make it when I hover on after, the opacity should appear. I'm going to write .btn. That's the first thing. Then my after will follow. Then hover. So now when I hover on my after, my opacity is going to be 1. So when I save, so when I hover on it, you see how it is? You see how it's going? But it's not smooth, it just boom, it just appearing. So I'm going to make a transition in my after. So I'm going to come here and make a transition of opacity. Transition of my opacity, which is going to be transition. It's going to be opacity here. Going to be opacity, which is my first, which I'm going to make it 100 millisecond linear. 100 millisecond linear. So I'm going to save. So when I hover on it, there's going to be a smooth change. You see, it's not changing direct, there's a smooth change that is happening. Okay guys, before we continue, my name is Bin Mustafa, and if you're new to Code Dev Academy, please help my channel grow by please subscribing to the channel and turning on the notification bell so that anytime I post a new video, you're going to be the first to view. So let's go back to our work. Okay, now after putting my transition on my opacity to be 100 milliseconds linear, and so let me save it and run it. So as you can see how smooth it changes. As you can see how also my background color is changing. But let me also make something. Let me make the whole of my background color to have a transition also. So I'll come to my BTN, which is my button. I'll come down here and say transition. Make a transition of my background color. So I'll make it to be 100 millisecond linear. 100 millisecond linear. So when I save, there's going to be a transition on my background color. The whole of not just my button, but the whole of my background color. So as you can see how smooth it changes. The under part also changes. So with this, I hope you have actually gained something out of this video, and I hope you have enjoyed it throughout this journey. Hope you've gotten something new.